Hello and welcome to all of you in attendance. My name is Joe Barhoum and I am Board's Global Head of Sales Enablement. Today I have the privilege of moderating this LinkedIn Live session. Now we're here today to talk about demand planning, which is an essential part of the supply chain management. You're likely here because, like us, you've observed the high frequency of supply chain disruptions, changing consumer sentiments, and new technologies like AI over the past few years. But before we jump into the heart of today's demand planning session, I'd like to introduce our two guests, beginning with David and then over to JD.
Thanks, Joe. My name's Dave Food. I'm head of supply chain here at Board. I've been both a practitioner working in supply chain, but then also working with solutions on a wide range of projects, working in industries like banking, supply chain, for pharmaceutical, automotive, and other areas. And I now have the privilege of teaching some of this stuff with postgraduate students. So I think I've got a few stories to share today. JD, what about you?
Yeah, I'm JD. I'm the country lead for Ion USA. I've been in supply chain for about 20 years. I started my career in planning in the consumer goods sector, wines and spirit exactly. And I'm now with Ion for 6 years already. So yeah, Ion is a group of 120 planning specialists helping clients reach the next level in business planning. And then right now I'm calling from the very hot Scottsdale, Arizona, where I'm attending the Institute of Business Forecasting and Planning. So it's all about business planning, forecasting, the topic of today. And I'm glad to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dave and JD, for being here. It's going to be a good conversation. And to all of our guests in attendance, please ask your questions in the comment section. We'll address them at the end of our discussion today, but you never know, we might highlight a few. So if you ask a great question or a funny question, we'll make sure to highlight it as we keep going. Now, demand planning is especially important in today's globalized and competitive marketplace. Customers are more demanding than ever before, at least that's how we see it, and they expect to be able to get their products and services when they want them, no matter where they are. Demand planning helps businesses to meet these expectations and stay ahead of the competition. Now, you too have witnessed a lot of trends in supply chain over the years. Where do you think it has all been going wrong for some companies with their demand planning?
So I'll kick off first. One of the challenges around demand planning is there's an enormous amount of data. And that data is coming at us more quickly. It's more granular. It's now in hours rather than weeks and months. But it's also down to the detail. And the challenge is that the solutions are in the detail. And so it's not just a question of creating an aggregate plan and creating an aggregate forecast and that being good enough. That's no longer good enough. With the globalized supply chains that we have, we often find that getting the demand signal, the right product in the right place at the right time, is leading us to a place where we've got to get the forecast more accurate and more responsive. And I think this particularly becomes a challenge because some of that data is sitting in different silos, in different parts of the business. Companies have different departments who have awareness of customer demand changes, contract changes. There might be changes in terms of the way the product gets consumed by the consumers. All of these influence the behavior of the demand signal and therefore the resultant forecast that gets generated from it. JD?
Yeah, well, from my side, over the last few years with the COVID pandemic, the rippling effect, and now the geopolitical tensions, the horrific wars, the variability, the economic volatility is through the roof. So yeah, it's a new situation for organizations, and they need to be more agile, meaning they need to be able to make faster decisions. And this agility needs to be built in. I fully agree, Dave, on the fact that data is key, data availability, data quality, and we're moving more and more from a world where we could work only with internal data, historical data could be used, to now something more that includes external data. So all that can help improve the forecast and the reliability of the prediction. There is also one thing I would like to add is about maybe data latency. So data latency is the ability to take data and get insights from it, and and I think it's very important to have the technology that helps you decrease this latency to a minimum. Like that, you can maximize the value of the decisions. So yeah, that's regarding data. That's I would say my point. Maybe another point, Dave, is also, well, it's a classic one. It's about organizations. Many organizations still work in siloed, whether it's between teams or processes. Yeah, there is a lack of effective communications between department within an organizations. So yeah, not a lot of
And that
communication with
and that can
sales.
be characterized by a whole bunch of things. So distrust starts to build between teams. People stop sharing data because sharing bad news early or late creates a kind of real tension in the conversation. But actually, if you can start to build a planning process where you're sharing your demand data, so the assumptions that come from sales are also visible to the guys in supply chain and hopefully the guys in finance as well, the more you can pull this all together in one place means that you can make better decisions because you've got better visibility and more transparent assumptions.
Fully agree, Dave. Yeah, nobody wants to be the bad guy, but sometimes the difficult news need to be carried over and shared across the organization to avoid those misalignments, misunderstanding about the future demand. So yeah, um, cross collaboration is very important, and yeah, an effective demand planning requires that the different functions talks together. So yeah.
And I think another disconnect between silos is that different people are focusing on different time horizons and they're also focusing on different measures. So, for example, the sales team might be very much focused upon promotions that are going to be happening or orders that are going to be placed in the next weeks and months. Whereas the procurement team that are taking information from the forecast, or maybe the supply chain team, are looking ahead. And one of the key things that we need to talk about today is the need for making sure that you're looking further ahead than your longest lead time. Because if you're not looking that far ahead, then you are not considering how you can influence your supply by getting your demand plan better. And one of the things I would like to say is I think intelligent demand is something that is very much about aligning those forecasts to feed into your supply chain. So giving people the capability and visibility into their extended supply chain, because supply chain is not just one link, it's a set of links or even a network of links. That means that we can pull intelligence from our customers, what's going on with our customers and maybe even their customers, EPOS data, electronic point of sale data, all very useful. It may be something you don't want to directly connect into your planning process, but you'd love to have visibility of that. But then you also might want to look to your supply. If there are constrained capacities in your suppliers, you don't want to start creating a forecast that is 200% of what you can produce. You then need to start thinking about those elements to drive a good demand plan. Well, JD, what are the consequences of bad demand planning? What things happen when we get demand planning wrong?
Well, of course, very quickly when planning is bad, it shows in inventory. So, being overstock or understock is clearly a first impact that you can see very quickly. But also, yeah, that's links to customer satisfaction. If you don't have the product for your customer, well, they pick the competitors. Also, if you are overstock, you are having a higher carrying stock. It impacts your profitability. So, very quickly, having a bad or a not efficient demand planning process leads to a financial impact, and at the end, it's the profitability of the company. So, yeah, it's quite simple the impact of bad planning.
And I'd like to go a bit further than that, because actually it's worth focusing on improving your forecast accuracy, because your forecast accuracy has two impacts financially. If you get your forecast more accurate, remember when I'm talking forecast more accurately, it's item by location by time period. So it's that level of granularity. If you get your forecast more accurate, then what that means is you have more of the right products in the right place at the right time, which means your revenue goes up. Everybody's happy. But actually, there's an interesting secondary effect here. Because you get more of your forecast more accurate, that means you have less of the wrong products in the wrong place. And those products, if they stay there for too long, are going to have to be discounted or thrown away, or something's going to have to happen because they become slow moving stock. So getting your forecast more accurate drives up revenue and also drives down operating costs. I guess some people would also talk about, the element of end-to-end supply chain means that the bullwhip effect that we know from things like the beer game, where you get a small little change in your customer demand and that gets magnified through the supply chain, are the kind of things that mean if we can get better about dependent and independent demands, then we can start to dampen some of those things so that the bullwhip effect is not quite so significant. JD, is there a good process to this? Is there a right process to demand planning?
Well, I would say when we look at an organization, we always look at, of course, the people, process, and technology combination. It's very important, of course, to start with the team, to have a team in place that is focusing on planning. And right after that, having the right process in place and working before implementing a system is also very key. So, of course, I encourage organizations that are still running, let's say, maybe their operations on Excel, um, to to go with a more structured tool that can help them be better, faster, more agile. But when we look at a classic type of process, of course, what is very important is to have the data, to ensure that you can have that your data are accurate, they are complete, they are up to date, and investing in data quality, cleansing, to eliminate inaccuracies is very important. And then from the leveraging those data, from those data that you have, whether they are internal data, and hopefully you can start having external data that will enhance your forecasting accuracy. Then, of course, once you have data, you need to running an algorithm that can project those data into the future can be very useful. So yeah, having the ability to have different forecasting methods that can align with your industry, product characteristics, market dynamics. So all that is very helpful. And then you need to also to evaluate those methods and maybe update the parameters and make sure that you keep them relevant. So that's let's say once you have that, it's your baseline. Then, enriching the data is also very, very important. Getting that market intelligence into your plan. You cannot rely fully only on your historical data without considering external factors like market trends, changes in customer behavior, and also we mentioned that earlier, being connected with the other teams. So who can help provide that market intelligence? Is it sales? Is it marketing? Or can it be tools like maybe social media? So that's how to make I would say, quality plan. And then once you have a good plan, you need to have those reviews. So prepare the reviews and present to discuss and validate the forecast with the different stakeholders. So these meetings are very, very important to align the organization and understand the forecasted demand. And finally, as we already touched a little bit into the discussions about that, measuring the accuracy and the effectiveness of the demand planning process is very, very important. Having a set of KPIs that are well defined and continuously monitor and adjust those metrics to drive improvement. What is very important is that the demand planning process that you have in place has forecast value add. You don't want to work hard on a monthly basis on a process that doesn't provide any value. So that's key. Dave, want to add something?
One thing I was going to add to that was that validate results and improve means that the whole demand planning process is a process of continuous improvement. It's not just a question of creating a forecast. Oh, we've done it, guys. You will make some assumptions in your demand planning. You will set those assumptions into your algorithms. And interestingly, I've been in this long enough. You can see from my lack of hair how long I've been in supply chain. But one of the things that I would have said 10, 15 years ago was it was all about the algorithms. It's much more than just about algorithms now. It's about collaborating, sharing data, validating data. So an assumption that might come through from the sales team might then be translated into a different view. It might be translated into the phasing of the forecast. So the total number of the promotion, for an example, might be 5,000 units. But the phasing of that 5,000 might be in 1 month or over 3 months. And that's the kind of thing that starts to come out of good demand planning, that you start to have some of those kind of discussions and you start to learn from one another. And then here's the interesting thing. You start to feed back into your demand planning process and talks with the rest of the business and with customers about how these things might change. For example, I talked earlier on about where there is a shortage in terms of supply. If there was a shortage in terms of supply, a message that would come through the demand plan would be, let's not have any promotions on these products next month because we won't be able to supply them. That doesn't come from a disintegrated plan. That comes from an integrated demand plan where people are sharing their assumptions together and driving some of those things.
If I could interject for a moment, Dave and JD. So in the discipline of sales, there is a type of buying bias called the availability bias. And what this means is if there is a lack of supply, so there's no stock of a particular thing, not only in that instance are you potentially losing out on one or more sales, but you may actually drive this bias with your consumers that there's a general lack of availability of a certain segment of stock or just stock in general, depending on how much they lean into this bias. And it has a long-term impact on your consumer interactions, right? Because then you may have several people or maybe one really important person who thinks there just isn't any supply at this kind of place, so I shouldn't go there anymore. Or there are multiple locations, I'll go to the other ones. They tend to have more supply. And it's just a matter of what you just described.
Yeah, I think it's very valid that some of those elements have a knock-on effect. The transfer of demand, things where people talk about, for example, demand sensing and demand shaping, trying to sense that there is demand there, but you don't have the ability to fulfill it. So there's then the opportunity to try and nudge that demand either in time to maybe delay an order, or the reality that you might nudge it to an alternative product. But here's the reality, that might happen naturally anyway, as you were talking about transference. So that element of, well, I can't get this, so I'll buy something else instead. That also is noise that ends up in your demand history that if you don't do something about it, will drive some very interesting behaviors. I think we had an interesting question come up there about how bad forecasts can impact production plans. That's going to be the kind of thing that helps to... if the forecast isn't right, then your plans are going to be wrong. Now, how wrong your plans are depends on how interconnected they are, and therefore, as a consequence, how you can think about some of those elements. And if the forecast is wrong, the plan is wrong. If the plan is wrong, then you're probably going to generate waste. You're probably going to generate additional costs, expediting costs, because the product is in the wrong warehouse. Now you've got to put it onto a train or a plane to get it somewhere else. And so there's a whole set of knock-on effects that you don't necessarily see in the planning process. They result in the logistics costs or the warehousing costs or even your customers' costs sometimes. And one of the things we haven't talked about, which I think to respond to Belinda's question here, would be how do you look at these different things? You've created a demand plan, and now you know there's some alternative information coming in. Maybe you've got an opportunity to make a decision. So instead of sourcing your products from Turkey, you're going to source them from Indonesia. That's going to reduce your price significantly. That can make you more competitive in the marketplace. But you may not choose to share that with your customers. So demand stays the same if you do that. But if you drop your price and therefore share the cost cutting, then your volume goes up. And so there's some interesting opportunities to look at scenarios. Those are the kind of things that you can't do with Excel spreadsheets. You need a more advanced tool that's going to help to take those parameters and turn that forecast into something that means you can have a commercial discussion with the commercial team. Is that the kind of thing, JD, that other companies are doing?
Well, absolutely. I think right now there is a big being focus on sustainability, on ESG, and from a planning perspective, I think what is very important is that we, let's say as a planning community, we're aware of the impact and what we can do to reduce that impact. The other day, I was at a conference, another conference, and a gentleman called Michael Ford was mentioning, oh, it is an E2E process, and he was asking, do you know what is a E2E process? And I was thinking end to end. No, in fact, he was meaning earth to earth. So whatever we do, basically, we get the raw materials from earth, and we need to be mindful of that. And at the end of the cycle, we put things back to earth, and we want to put, of course, as a minimum in landfills, and use as much as possible what has been produced, and consume it in a useful way. So absolutely, we see that a lot. Lots of companies are more and more concerned, and planning is playing a key role, because a perfect plan technically should lead to a very very minimum, let's say, a stock, or let's say overstock, and at the end of the day, it's less waste in the in landfill. So yeah, very big concern right now.
I think it's worth calling out a couple of things here that are influencing the stability of the demand plan. What we've seen as a consequence post COVID and other events as well, not just things like COVID, but any significant event, is there's an element of uncertainty that creeps in. That might be an uncertainty from the marketplace, where people are not sure what to buy and how much to buy, or it may be an uncertainty of how that product, where it's manufactured and where it's being sourced from. And so there's a whole variety of uncertainties that creep in, which means that the forecast becomes more variable. And the more variable the forecast becomes, the more uncertainty creeps in, the more you need safety stock rather than turnover stock. And so I'm certainly hearing from CFOs around the world who are saying things like, okay, our revenue's looking pretty good. Our forecasts are not too bad, but variability is a very difficult thing to handle. And so forecasts have become less stable than they have been. And that's resulted in people sometimes saying, okay, we need to make changes. And so people have simplified their product portfolio. Again, part of a demand plan to think about what products are we going to stock, but then also thinking about routes to market in terms of who we're going to sell it through. And those are things that also influence the demand signal. So something that needs to be considered.
You got me wondering, Dave, is inside of the mentality of a team, a supply chain demand planning team, is there a tug of war between, let's maybe in that situation simplify our product set, our portfolio, versus the other opposite end would be increase the detail in which we forecast? Is one easier than the other?
Yeah, that's a great question, Joe. I mean, the more products there are, the more complex it is. And if you're switching products on or promotions on and off, you might have run a promotion every other month, and that demand will go from the promoted product to the standard product or to an alternative flavor. And all of that creates noise. So you will find there are companies out there who have a philosophy that says, let's keep our supply chain clean and simple. Very few promotions, a limited range of products, and that's about smoothing the flow through the supply chain. And then you'll find other companies who promoting all the time. There's always a product on promotion. That promotion will create an increase in demand for this period, but maybe a decrease in demand for next month. And so you start to create noise. So it depends on the philosophy of your business. What are you trying to do? Provide standard, reasonably priced things, or get people to come in because of a promotion? I mean, that's the purpose of the promotion. A successful promotion, which affects the demand plan, increases your demand, and the customer stays with you. That's the real purpose. Has there been a kind of development here, JD, as people are starting to get more data? Is there a maturity going on around the demand planning process?
So yes, of course, technology and the availability of data has really, let's say, enabled a better segmentation. So you want to segment your products, your customer, to allow a more granular and accurate forecast. Of course, you can do that for high value, high impact product that also requires a specific attention. And that's really let's say, what technology has allowed, and we see that a lot. But on the other hand, we need to be careful with an organization that, because the technology is available and the data is available, that it doesn't come to becoming a sickness for the company, because we see that the portfolios of some companies are so rich that it becomes a big problem to manage. So finding the right balance is very important, and on one hand, you should use segmentation and use the fact that you can apply specific models to a certain category, or you are well aware of your portfolio. At the same time, you don't want to have such a huge portfolio that on a, let's say, many times on economic metrics, you are having negative margins. You are selling, you are pushing products that are with negative margins. So, yeah, finding the right balance is key.
And that segmentation can be in lots of different dimensions. It can be product by customer, product by supplier, even product by supply chain. And I think most of our listeners today would be familiar with the Pareto analysis, that ABC classification. 80, what he said, 80% of the business is with 80% of the business is with 20% of the customers. That's a kind of simple. But the ABC XYZ goes to another dimension that says, let's look at frequency, let's look at complexity, let's look at volume, let's look at profitability. There's lots of different dimensions to that segmentation that can drive different supply chain behaviors. And some of those supply chain behaviors might be to automate your supply chain, because if you've got a regular runner and rider with little variability and a stable forecast, you can just switch it to automatic. But that's not going to be true for all of your products. So there's some real maturity here that goes from kind of judgmental forecasting right through to using things like AI and machine learning to help to drive different capabilities and thinking.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Dave. Systems and tools are meant to help us do a better job, and also reduce a little bit the grinding that comes with a lot of the tasks that we can do in planning. So being able to automate some of the, let's say, the calculations in your portfolio, making sure that it's kind of running on autopilot is super important. Like that, you can free up time for your team to focus on new product introductions, end of life, and end of life products, promotions. So you want to, again, you want to have to add value to the planning process, and whatever can be automatized on your big runners, well, you should do that. No need to forecast something that a good model will provide a very a good accuracy. So yeah, that's that's the advantage of technology, and that's why we encourage our clients to, yeah, to leverage the technology and make sure that they can use the technology to the best as possible.
Yeah, I think there's some interesting value drivers in the demand or demand planning space that mean that we've got to get better at sharing data across the different departments. We've got to think about global versus local. We've got to think about some of those elements. And then we've also got to think about the opportunity to consider different scenarios, because there is always something else to consider. I mean, that's the kind of question that the executive team ought to be asking of the demand plan, is to say things like, what if? And what if is not always about limitation. Sometimes it might be, we've got capacity in our factories here. How could we sell that? I mean, if I characterize this with a very simple example, JD, if a company could sell 1 million a month, and the production team say we can sell 1 million a month, and the sales team say we can sell 1 million a month, that all sounds great. Everything's fine. But then if you get one level down, and I keep it really simple, and we could sell 800,000 white ones and 200,000 black ones, but we can produce 200,000 black ones and sell 800,000 white ones. Suddenly we've got a mismatch of demand. And that's where you've got to start to say, okay, not only can we increase our capacity and make more, but can we sell more of the things that we can produce? So there's that looking at your demand chain and saying, okay, what else can we do in the marketplace to enlarge market share and leverage our production capability? Those are the kind of things that help to drive towards better return on investment from a more accurate demand plan, and the kind of things that some of the board customers are leveraging in terms of thinking about taking their demand plan and turning it into a value plan. So it's not just volume. And that's where some of the other departments become interested. The finance team or the sales team, they don't want to talk volume, they want to talk value. And so we've got to be able to translate that demand plan or be able to look at it. I don't mean cashing up. Cashing up would be a volume times the value. I mean being able to genuinely look at the demand plan from a commercial perspective to see some of those things. Is that the kind of thing that you see in the marketplace? Are people turning those volume forecasts into value-based numbers?
So, Dave, yes. Before going to that question, I really fully agree to what you said previously regarding what if scenarios, and I think we have to learn from the last 5 years or maybe 4 years with all the disruptions that happen in such a short period of time, and we never had that. It seems that those major events are coming more and more frequently. So yeah, we need to be able to manage those what if. Maybe we can call that those what could, because okay, if tomorrow we have another pandemic, are we better prepared than the last one? Um, and I think those kind of questions should be brought up at the executive table. Okay, are we addressing potential issues? I mean, we had so much examples these couple of years where there was the flow of supply was completely stopped. So some crazy things happening. Prices went through, 100 times more expensive on some commodities. So all these things, we should not consider them as a one-off. We should also have them part of the scenarios, and they should be discussed at the, let's say, the SNOP table or the planning table, and the leadership should make a decision based on that. So to come back to your question, Dave, yes, of course, decision makers usually talks talks with financial terms. Being able to valorize your volume plan is really key because that's the language those executives speak, and being able to show the impact of missed sales or of the inventory that you have when it's in dollars, when it's dollar terms. Well, that really speaks to these people. So yeah, very important to have these capabilities and bring the facts to the executive tables for them to make the decisions.
Yeah, I mean, one example of one of our customers at board who use our platform for collaborating around demand is a pharmaceutical company who are sharing both information from the sales teams that are driving their performance in sales performance, but also from a marketplace point of view, pulling all that information together to create a truly collaborative matrix and metrics around demand planning. And that's significantly accelerated their route to a quality forecast, but that's also helped them to hit some metrics they weren't able to previously hit because their forecast stepped up a gear in terms of accuracy, of magnitude, but also in terms of flexibility and responsiveness.
Very good. I just want to remind everybody in the audience, please ask your questions in the comments section. We'll definitely address them. Some have come in the last few minutes, which are great. So we've taken note of those, but please keep it coming. All right.
I think.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So I was just going to say, Joe, one of the things, just to give another example, because JD, you were talking about some of the shortages we've had recently. One of the board customers who works in the kind of electronic handsets type space, silicon chips. We've all heard some news about shortages of silicon chips around the world. They were taking their demand plan and looking down their supply chain into their customers to understand the demand signal that was coming, to make sure that their forecast was connected to their customer forecast, so they weren't missing the opportunity to deliver customer requirements, but also they were not risking penalty clauses and service level agreements. And that all came out of making sure that the demand plan was being interrogated and reviewed at a detailed level to ensure that the demand signal that was coming from the customers was also being considered. If you get EPOS data or forecasts from your customers, you at least ought to have that visible in your demand planning platform so that you can start to make decisions around whether you respond to that or not. You maybe don't want to integrate it directly, but you certainly want to have that visibility for your demand planner to enable you to understand the event that happens and then use that analysis to take decisions that then will result in actions.
Yeah, Dave, I'm with you here. We hear that a lot when it comes to risk. We hear a lot of de-risking strategies now, where organizations are looking at how, let's say, their organizations, their plans can have some risks or can be weak. Lots of things around lead times that were not considered as much as it should have been in the past. Also, alternative source of procurement, and having that in the plan and questioning the network design that is in place is also very useful for those organizations to make sure that they look at every angle of their business and make sure that it's sustainable.
Are you guys ready to take some questions from our audience?
Yeah, love to.
All right. Here's a good one that I'll put up on the screen. Now, just as a caveat, there is a follow-up message that I'll add context to this message. So in current market scenario, how far in the future should we forecast for? And that caveat is from an FMCG manufacturing perspective.
Okay, so the first thing that I would say is you always need to be forecasting further ahead than your longest lead time. because that's where you're going to have the most impact. So that's the first thing. You've got to always be forecasting longer than your forecast. So if you're currently focusing on 3 to 6 months, and you've got some products that take 9 months from a lead time point of view, there's a disconnect there straight away. But you're quite right. With the question, one of the things that I would say is we have shortened our horizons, and therefore we've become much more reactive. And one of the things that demand planning, by lifting your horizon, you will extend your visibility. By extending your visibility, you will give yourself greater opportunity to respond. So I would say you ought to be extending your window, not just how far you're forecasting, but extend the window that you focus upon.
Mm-hmm.
And in the FMCG market, I'd be typically recommending that you're at least looking 4 to 7 months out. So that's where your focus is. Within 4 months, actually, that should be taking care of itself. That's already in your production plans. But kind of 4 to 7 months out will be a good place to focus from an FMCG point of view.
Very good, Dave. Thank you.
Yeah.
JD, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe a little addition here. I think also, so the horizon is one thing, but also looking within that horizon, what could be the information that could add quality to your plan? So, do you know what are the drivers that are impacting your demand? If those drivers are known, can you include that in your plan? Because with the disruptions that we had over the last few years, relying on historical data is quite risky. Working on being able to have, let's say, those drivers maybe pulling a little bit your plan, pulling, let's say, the information for your plan is also an interesting thing. So yeah, usually the more relevant the drivers are, the more, let's say, short term. So yeah, fully agree with Dave that the horizon should cover at least the longest lead time. But having those short-term information also part of your plan can be helpful.
Our next question that came in is, what should we do if our current data is not good enough?
Let me kick off, JD. My first comment would be this, is can you get better data? I mean, that's a very important question here. Just because you say it's not good enough doesn't mean you got better. It just means you haven't got good enough data. So the first question is, can you get better? Now, if you can get better data, start collecting it. So a very common scenario with customers we've worked with is they say at the moment we've got demand data in months in Excel spreadsheets. And we can get it from our MRP system, our CRM system, but we're not collecting it at that moment. So I say, well, let's automate your existing Excel spreadsheet process. That means that you've got more time to do other things, whilst you're also collecting your demand signal now, maybe in weeks. And then you can feed that into your process and help to drive some different behaviors. So the first thing is, can you get better data? If you can, start collecting it. And then don't wait till you've got the perfect data. Start now, build your process, start to move. It's so much easier to steer a moving ship. So if your planning process is on the move, then you can start to improve it. It's not a one-time fix-all, switch on, it's sorted. It's start on the journey, improve the data, improve your planning decisions, and build out from there. And I'm sure you've done that with some of your some of the customers we've worked with there, JD.
Absolutely. You cannot wait for an excuse like I don't have perfect data to not to start. I think we encourage all our customers to start, and as you said, you improve over time. And by having that kind of continuous cycle where you PDCA, as everybody knows, in place, you improve over time. And life is not being perfect. It's it's moving forward with what you have.
Very good. There's another question that came in. Who are the key players to involve in the demand plan?
I'd love to answer this question with a question with what's a key player, but I won't go down that route. It depends. You obviously need the basics of the supply chain people and sales and marketing, but maybe you need a representative of your customers. If your customers are such a large part of your demand signal, maybe you need a customer service guy, or maybe you need the finance team to help to translate it into into a financial view. And sometimes you might need the supply side of things because there are significant constraints and limitations to the marketplace. So there's a whole range, but I wouldn't say get everybody there. There will be some people who need to come on a needs must basis. So you call them in for a particular project, managing supply chain around Chinese New Year, for example. Or there might be other people who are permanent members or people who come in for a season and then leave.
Excellent. JD, would you add anything to that before we move on to another question?
No, I think David
Dave did a
responded
great
very
job.
well. Yeah.
All right. So how do we handle risk and uncertainty in the demand plan?
It's a very, very good question. So maybe a very short answer. I think there is no silver bullet. I think what is very important is to have to start spotted to the issues that could happen, and that's what mentioned. What if? What could? If we start including potential risks or things that may have an impact on our plan, and monitoring those risks, are they going to realize or not? At least you start having some you have a better visibility, and if the risk is getting confirmed, you have seen it, you are kind of mentally prepared to react, and if you are very good, you can already have a number of scenarios available that, okay, if that risk is realizing, I have this and that measures in place. So yeah, for me, it's really spotting those potential risks and having them visible in your SNOP, let's say, sessions, demand planning review sessions. And okay, they are there. Everybody sees them. They are shared, and likely there is less surprises at the end.
Yeah, that's a great phrase. No surprises. I mean, I would say it's continually about reducing the unknowns. And the unknowns are often there because people don't share data. They don't share information. So deal with the internal issues, first of all, so that there is at least an open sharing of uncertainty. You know, okay, we have a potential order starting in 3 months' time. It's a 50% chance of happening right now. Share that. You know, that's a significant piece of information. Don't keep it to yourself just because you are or you aren't going to hit your sales target. Those kind of things are the kind of more open discussions that produce better demand planning process and increase trust.
Very good. Excellent. Well, thank you all for your questions. We appreciate it.
So one of the things I'd like to do is to I gave you a hint that I love teaching on this stuff. So any class that I teach, I love to give a little bit of homework to. And I hope that some of the participants today have learned something, have gathered something, and have got some things to think about. But I'd love to give you a little bit of homework for you to go away and think about, which might be things that you could ask of your existing demand planning team, which is, for example, I'm not going to cover all of these right now, but what happens if your demand is not fulfilled? What alternatives can you consider? What kind of things should you be asking of the business? And have you got agreement on what those strategies might be? From an area where you might think about making improvements, can you increase your horizon that you're gathering data from? Because that will enlarge your peripheral vision, that will enhance your view and give you the opportunity to go through 2 or 3 cycles of responding rather than just having to react, because it all happens so short term. And then I'd love to kind of close out with a question which says things like the insightful questions you can ask, which is, are our plans feasible? Can we actually do them? Have we got the sales team to make it happen? But also, have we got the supply capacity to ensure that that happens? All of these questions are going to be hopefully useful to you to help you to improve your demand planning processes and leverage your team to deliver a better demand plan.
Very good. Thank you, Dave. And thank you, JD. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. If you'd like, you can reach out to both JD and Dave on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me too, but I'll just direct you to those guys. But either way, we thank you for attending and have a good rest of your day. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.